Joining me now, Indiana Republican Congressman and member of the House Committee on Financial Services, as well as the House Budget Committee, Marlin Stutzman. Congressman, thanks for being on the show tonight.
Rick, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, what effect do you think this afternoon's Senate vote will have for the House vote on a similar war powers bill set to take place this week?
Well, as you know, the margin for Republicans in the House is very tight, and there are several House Republicans that have expressed major concerns. So it will be tight. I guess it will be interesting to see if any Democrats cross over and vote with Republicans. I suspect there wouldn't be very many, but it's going to be a tight vote, I think, either way.
I wonder if there's any lobbying going on behind the scenes between Republicans and Democrats to try and get some of your friends from across the aisle to come over to your side.
Well, we do have a couple of Iranian American Democrats that also are part of their caucus. And, we continue to hear from the Iranian community how grateful and thankful they are to President Trump for doing what he's doing. So, my hope is that we realize that the Iranian regime that is now deceased, those that haven't been killed, the world is going to be a better place without them. We know what type of people they were, and so my hope is that this is just finishing a state-sponsored terrorist country, a regime that has been a problem in our side for 40 years, and that President Trump gave them numerous opportunities to come back to the negotiating table and tell the world that they would not have nuclear capabilities, and they just didn't do it.
Well, it sounds like you're on the side of President Trump, that he acted within his executive authority when he ordered those massive airstrikes to launch Operation Epic Fury. Clearly, Iran did pose a dangerous and potentially very imminent threat to Israel and potentially the rest of the world.
Absolutely. And I think, the fact that they're now shooting into UAE, they're shooting into Qatar, Saudi Arabia, so even the Muslim world there in the Middle East is now divided. Turkey is sitting on the sidelines. I think, Iran really was in a box. They have been isolated. And a lot of this is because of President Trump's decisions over time by bringing in other countries through the Abraham Accords, through trade discussions, and through, of course, military support to be sure that not only Israel is safe, and of course, they're our best ally. But I'll tell you, Saudi Arabia has come to the table in a way that would not have been the case 20 years ago. Qatar, another country which we've been very skeptical of, and who they have been funding in the region when it comes to terrorist activity, they had come to the table to help UAE as well. So I think it's a different era than what it was after 9/11 and when the Bush administration went into Iraq. I think that we're really seeing that the world, or especially parts of the world in that area, realize that Iran was a problem and that they just would not let go of their terrorist activities. And of course, getting a nuclear bomb was their ultimate goal, and they would have been able to leverage a lot of us.
Well, it's definitely encouraging to see some of those nations step up when they need to step up. And I don't think it's a surprise, Congressman, that most Democrats have expressed a lack of support for this war, even though most also say the regime had to go and a nuclear-armed Iran was unacceptable. Now, Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman was, I think, the lone Democrat offering full support for the president's actions. And I want to share a clip of Fetterman backing President Trump.
It's pretty toxic for a Democrat to say, I happen to agree with the president on really anything at this point. But again, find someone that opposes this, saying they've all said we can never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear bomb. Then what's and that seems like that's happening. Why can't you just acknowledge that's a good thing? Why not?
It's common sense, and it's great to hear Fetterman say that, but what's your message to the rest of the Democrats and members of your own party who are opposed to the war?
You know what? It is refreshing to at least see one Democrat on the Senate side just using common sense. Yeah, I know a lot of people, even in the MAGA base, say, well, President Trump said no new wars. Well, we have to realize that they've been chanting debt to America, debt to Israel from Iran, from the regime, for 40-some years. This has been an ongoing war off and on for quite some time. Of course, President Obama gave them a terrible deal in sending boatloads of cash over there to the regime that just ultimately ended up back in terrorist activities. And President Trump gave them an opportunity to negotiate, to show in good faith that they were going to stop their nuclear ambitions, and they didn't. And one thing about President Trump is he takes action. He's not just a mouthpiece and says something and he backs it up with action. And I think the American people appreciate that for the most part. Now, Democrats, of course, just had TDS and they can't get over any success that President Trump has. But in this case, if President Trump is successful, then America is a much safer place. And also, there's other parts of the world that are going to be safer. We're going to have some real allies going forward, and that we can build in these countries rather than have to be concerned about terrorist cells being created.
Well, as I said in my monologue, Iran was given every opportunity to lay down their nukes, and they could keep doing what they were doing without hurting their neighbors and allies of the West, and they wouldn't do it. But I also want to ask you about the war's economic impact, because after a couple of days, down days on Wall Street, the markets actually edged back into positive territory today. Iran has the third largest oil reserves in the world, with more than 200 billion barrels. The war has caused sweet crude, also known as Brent oil, to jump by 0.5% to $78.86 a gallon. And meantime, natural gas prices fell by more than 4% to $2.92. Gold prices increased today, just under 0.5% to $51.47 an ounce. Affordability is obviously the main concern for hardworking Americans. So how do you think the Iran war over time now will impact the pocketbooks of voters? And we have about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, well, ultimately, the November election is about pocketbook. And, we've got a long way to get there. But, the fact that the markets are trending the way that they did within this short amount of time, I think shows that there's confidence that President Trump is going to act quickly, decisively, and that our troops are going to get the job done, crush the evil empire that was the Iranian regime.
Congressman Marlin Stutzman, we really appreciate your time, sir. I know you're busy there on Capitol Hill. Thank you very much for joining the show.
Thank you. Friend to be with you.